Hello and welcome to the Unconventional Ministry Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wiens, Senior Impact Catalyst at Sat7 USA. My guest today is president of an organization that invests in the people that have the greatest impact on the Great Commission. Their work is with the most vulnerable part of those serving in the Great Commission. Curious about what we're going to talk about today? For more than 47 years, Interaction International has come alongside third culture kids, known as TCKs of all sorts, and especially MKs, Missionary Kids. Through the Interaction International Transition Programs, over 1,400 TCKs have attended their programs in cross-cultural transitions. I want to thank my host for this podcast, Sat7 USA, a Middle East and North Africa broadcast media ministry making God's love visible across the Middle East and North Africa. The ministry has 4 satellite TV channels in the major languages of the MENA region of Arabic, Farsi, and Turkish. Sat7 also has digital, social media, and the Sat7 Plus app available for free with all their satellite content streaming live globally. Read their amazing stories at sat7usa.org. That's SAT7USA.org. My guest today is Bret Taylor, the president of Interaction International. He has been working with MKs and TCKs since 1999. He's a graduate of Hope International University. Bret leads the MK Caregivers Summit, is co-founder and board member of the TCK Care Accreditation, and developed the Adaptable TCK Model. He has also traveled to 36 countries, but he calls Charlotte, North Carolina his home. He is married to his wife, Mindy, and they have 3 kids. So, Bret, it's great to have you on the Unconventional Ministry Podcast.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate being invited on to share about our unique ministry.
Well, let's start with your ministry. A lot of our podcast listeners maybe haven't heard of Interaction International. So describe for our podcast listeners the ministry and the vision of the ministry.
Yes, Interaction International has been around since 1976. It was founded by David Pollock, and our vision is to collaboratively ignite global transformational movements for the care and equipping of third culture kids and their community. Now, what is the third culture kid? That's the bigger question here, but we are doing everything we can to support that group.
So since you brought up TCK, Third Culture Kid, I'm sure a lot of our podcast listeners, they maybe have heard of it, but they really don't know what it stands for. What is the TCK?
Yeah, Third Culture Kid, TCK. David Pollock, our founder, kind of gave the general definition that we use today, and many people like it. A third culture kid is an individual who, having spent a significant part of their developmental years in a culture other than their parents' home culture. In other words, these are kids who have, because of their parents' profession, usually lived in an international context. So these are usually kind of in 4 groups, either military families, foreign service diplomat families, international business, and the one that we work primarily with, but not exclusively, is missionary families. So families who are living overseas, they take their kids with them cross-culturally. They develop some unique things, so we call them third culture kids.
And this is a great topic because as your host, I'm a TCK, a third culture kid, also a missionary kid, having grown up in West Africa. So I always like to talk about missionary kids, TCKs. As we think about that, what are their biggest challenges as they, transition back from where their parents are serving, where the business couple is, and they come back to their passport country? What are some of the biggest challenges they face?
Yeah, there are some amazing gifts and advantages of being a third culture kid that I tell parents, hey, you cannot pay for enough tutoring to kind of prepare and equip kids with these third culture kids with the opportunities that they're going to have. But there are some definite challenges to being a third culture kid. And when prepared for well, they can be navigated around. So, for example, one of the difficulties that happens when we have families return back to their passport country, in other words, the country where their parents are from, not necessarily the country where they have been raised. We call that their host country, where they've lived overseas. When they come back, I would say that there's 2 big issues. One is there's issues within their own home, and there's issues returning to their passport culture. with regard to their home, one of the things is simple vocabulary. Parents say, hey, we're going to go home now. We're going to go home and visit family. We're going to go home back to our passport culture. But for these kids, that doesn't feel like their home. For many of them, they spent most of their life outside of that country. And so the other place where they've lived overseas feels like home. And so even within a family, the way parents communicate to their kids can cause some friction and some tensions there, because identity is rooted for parents, usually geographically in a place differently than where our third culture kids identify their context, their geography. The other part that is really fascinating and is helpful to unpack for third culture kids and their parents is that when these kids return back to their passport countries, they fall into this category we call hidden immigrants. We call them hidden immigrants because while they look like, and for the context of this conversation, let's say an American missionary family has headed to Kenya, they came back to America. These kids who have lived most of their life in Kenya, they come back and they look like Americans because that's who their parents are. That's where their origins are, but they no longer think like the American kids. And as a result, they're having these hidden immigrant issues. People assume that they know everything that other Americans know, but in reality, there's sometimes cultural gaps. There's different issues that they have missed out on as a result of their experience overseas. They learned a lot more, but they're also missing out on things. And so it causes some tension.
Everything you said resonates with me, thinking back to my experience. But, you have language, you have culture, you have syntax of language, you have worldview. All that's been shaped by the international experience, and coming back to your passport country or the U.S., you have to work through that. So how does Interaction International then come alongside these TCKs, these MKs that are cross-cultural in language and syntax and worldview and experience? How do you come alongside them to help them in their transition back to their passport country?
Yeah, I love Interaction has been going for, again, 45 years. And so we've offered a lot of different ways to support third culture kids and their families. So we kind of break it into two categories. We do direct support and we do indirect support. So currently right now, some of the direct engagement, in other words, directly helping supporting the third culture kids themselves, whether teens, young adults. We do online, for example, youth groups. Some of these kids are living in isolation, don't really feel connected to their community sometimes. And so they need a place where they can feel normal. And the best place for most third culture kids to feel normal is with other third culture kids. So we do online youth groups. We've created some devotional books to help them process through their transitions with a biblical grid overlaid on that. We do camps to help them in their transition to understand who they are. We do coaching, and we do online magazines to help them share articles and share stories. So those are the direct things. And then we also do indirect support. So we support organizations by giving organizations training. We host conferences on third culture kids and the missionary kids. We do consulting. And one of my favorite things is we place student teachers in international schools to try and help keep international schools well supported with quality teachers.
I was reading on your website, TCKs from all over the world can get a running start on transitioning to North America and life beyond at Transit Lounge. And I know our daughter, she went through Interaction International's reentry program, and that really helped her. She's actually on your board now. What is this Transit Lounge that I read about on your website?
For some third culture kids, the place that they feel most at home is the airport. Due to their highly mobile lifestyles, they're constantly coming and going through the airports, and that's that place in between. And that somewhat represents who they are. So we stole that idea of a transit lounge, a place in between. And what our camp is a place in between that transition of having left one place and arriving back to North America. And for us, what Transit Lounge is a place, to quote Chris O'Shaughnessy, a place where they can process intellectually what they know intuitively. This idea of they have some things in their life that they just haven't been able to put words to. And we like to, in that context, give them some of the words to be able to articulate, to normalize their experience. And as they normalize their experience, as they share some of their stories, as they process what's been happening in their life, it settles them into a place. One of the things that David Pollock was famous for saying is, if you leave well, you can enter well. And what we're trying to do through this camp is to help them leave well where they have been, take all the good things that they can from that, hopefully process some of the things and let go of some of the things that are holding them back, so that as they enter into their passport culture where their parents are from, they can just engage in have a better chance of engaging well. One of the girls one time, this was last summer, she said, I can't believe you're saying some of these things out loud, because we're saying very directly in our camp some of these issues, the hard things that they have wrestled with. And for some of them, it's freeing to have this light spoken into some of these dark places in their life. And it gives them a chance to start afresh and start anew.
So you provide really a lot of resources, not only for the TCK, but also for the parents and organizations. Where can people get this information and start looking through some of the resources that you provide?
Yeah, I mean, a simple Google search would be third culture kids. Is becoming more and more popularized. And so you can find a lot of resources on that. Third culture kids. Missionary Kids would be a more nuanced version of that if you're raising missionary kids yourself. But Interaction International, we're happy to provide resources or point you to the resources that you need. There's special educational resources that are sometimes needed for families who are living in these highly mobile international settings. So we want to point people to those right directions and help them to have healthy, strong families. Our website is interactioninternational.org, although we shortened the international, so it's interaction with an INTL.org, or you can just Google search Interaction International, and usually if you add MK or TCK at the end, you'll find us in the Google search that way.
And I want to encourage our podcast listeners to check this out. Go to the website, start being informed, and then do Bret a favor and share some of these resources you're learning with global staff that your church may have, or agencies may have. Share this information and get the word out that there's a lot of resources available. Bret, I want to go back to Transit Lounge. I know we saw it firsthand when our daughter went through your early program. For our podcast listeners, just describe some of the benefits you've seen in TCKs that are going through your Transit Lounge program.
Yes, it's funny. Some of them are their parents. They go unwillingly. They don't want to go because they just kind of don't want to deal with some of the issues that they have. And yet, in fact, if you go on our webpage, you can watch a video of some of them talking about that. I didn't want to come. I wanted to do something else. I don't want to process these issues in my life. And yet those who come by the end of the conference, by the end of the seminars, they're grateful for the opportunity to learn, to feel comfortable, to be connected with others who get them in a way that they just didn't think was possible. They thought they were walking alone, and they didn't realize they were a part of a large community. So it's a camp. We have fun and games, but we're also processing. We're doing small group processing. We're doing large group lessons. And it's just an incredible experience. Parents will tell you they appreciate it so much when they've sent their kids there. We get emails from parents and students alike saying this was significant in their ability to transition back to their passport country.
So these camps are 5 days a week. What's the time frame?
Yeah, we offer 3 currently. We do a 5-day program for those who are younger, like middle school, high school aged, early high school. Usually those are heading back overseas again. And then we do a 7-day program generally for those who are finishing. They're not expecting to go back overseas, or especially for the big transition as they finished high school overseas and now they're entering into university. We do 2 of those programs every summer.
We got to talk about cost here. Does Interaction International subsidize scholarship? How does this work? Are you raising funds so you can subsidize this for TCKs that are coming from around the world into your programs?
Yes, Interaction International is running these at different facilities. And so we're having to rent facilities, and we're bringing in quality staff who understands MK TCK issues. Usually a lot of them are TCKs themselves. And it costs a good bit of money to do these programs. We recognize that the families who are coming have just incurred a lot of expense from moving back from an international setting. And then also they may have to travel again to get to where our camps are. So camps can cost about $800, $850 for us to provide the good quality programs that we have. Because we care about these families and we want to lower that obstacle, we try and keep the camp closer to $500 or so dollars, depending on this a 5-day or 7-day camp. And we just ask people to contribute to help make these more affordable, more accessible to families who are in need.
So I encourage our podcast listeners to reach out to their churches. I mean, all the churches have global workers that they send out. Many of those global workers are families. And so I encourage our podcast listeners to reach out to maybe you can ask your church to come alongside their own TCKs that are with global workers and subsidize this, send a check for $500 or $800, or maybe sponsor all the children, TCKs in a family, maybe. There's different ways that they could do that. So, again, this is very interesting. So do you have a cost per day or per week if they wanted to sponsor one TCK?
Yeah, if they want to go on our website and make a donation, that would be fantastic. And in June, we're looking to ramp up our program. So we do this fundraiser jump into June where we're raising funds. $45 is about what it costs a day for a camp that we're trying to sponsor them. And so if you want to help just for one day, it's $45 a week. Can cost. We're trying to raise about $320 per student. And this year we already have had, I think it's 62 people who have applied for scholarships, and we just grant it on faith that the money will come in to cover those costs. And so far, God has been gracious with us over all these years, and we've had all of our costs covered. And so if you'd like to be a part of that, we'd be blessed. And I can tell you without a doubt, these kids are so appreciative of the opportunity to come to camps. It changes their lives. Their parents are appreciative. They said their kids come back and they're brand new kids. And it's a fantastic thing to be able to change these TCK lives.
I assume that there's a lot of TCKs that don't come through these programs, maybe don't even know about it, so our podcast listeners can build awareness. But if you had more resources, more gifted people that can deal with the TCK reentry, or had funding to subsidize more TCKs coming, you could do a lot more for TCKs.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're looking to keep increasing. Last summer, we were able to do 4 camps in 4 different locations. This summer, we had to scale back to 3 due to staffing and availability. So a lot of needs. And one of our programs is already filled up for this summer. So we have a waiting list going, and we're hoping to get the other ones, people redirected to some of the other programs. I hate turning people away.
So give your website again so people can get on. And I think if they do your website /programs, they can get to like the Transition Lounge and some of these other programs that you have.
Yeah. If you go to interactionintl.org and you just do a search, or under programs, you'll see Transit Lounge. Go to Transit Lounge. You can learn about the programs we're offering this summer. And also we partner with other organizations. That's a big ethos of who we are. And so there's a few other organizations, one up in Canada and another one in the US, that offers a similar type of camp program. They're very important. They're tremendous. We've seen research that says that those who have the opportunity to do this kind of processing enter college well. And I hate to see kids head to college and burn out. So come on our website, find out about us, or we can happy to refer you to a few other people who are doing good quality programs as well.
You know, when I came back after high school to go to university, I don't think there were these programs to help people like me transition back into North America, my passport country. I know when we moved back to the States and our daughter was starting college, she went through your program, and we saw firsthand the benefit that it was. And, of course, now she's on your board. And she works as an ELL specialist in public school and interacts with a lot of internationals. So she's excited to be pouring herself back into TCKs and MKs, helping them through their transition back to their passport country. So, Bret, this has been fascinating. Thank you for coming on the Unconventional Ministry podcast.
I appreciate it. It was a real pleasure. We'll have to do this again sometime.
In our changing world, there are more ways than ever to do ministry. Sat7 as a broadcast media ministry is changing how ministry is done. Through innovative approaches, collaborative efforts, broadcast satellite television, web streaming, and social media, Sat7 is making a difference. Visit Sat7 online today at SAT7USA.com. to learn ways you can be a part of this kingdom work. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your friends. If you know of an unconventional ministry approach, please introduce us. We'd like to have them on as guests. Thank you again for joining this episode of the Unconventional Ministry Podcast.